Just how safe are America's ports right now? And how safe would they be if major port operations are taken over by a state-run Arab company? I'm here with Rear Admiral Thomas Gilmore of the U.S. Coast Guard and Jay Ahern with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Admiral, question to you. How are we doing right now, without any changes, in protecting our ports?
Well, I would say since 9/11, we've come a long ways. We've added a number of authorities. We have the Marine Transportation Security Act of 2000. We also have the International Port Ship and Facility Code passed. We've added a number of capabilities in people and vessels, so we've certainly come a long way. But I think we have a long way to go.
What's the worst case scenario? That somebody would sneak in some sort of explosive device that would blow up with heat or movement or something like that in a big container?
Well, we've looked at it.
Gas, perhaps.
We've looked at a number of scenarios throughout the port and tried to build our capabilities to address those different scenarios, but certainly those are scenarios we have. There's also a coal-style attack.
A what?
A coal-style attack, a small vessel running into a ship that we've also tried to address.
Mr. Ahern, let me ask you about, we've argued on this show many times, what percentage of our containers, those big containers that come into big ports, that get checked inside?
Last fiscal year, 11 million containers came into the United States from foreign, and we looked at about 5% of those containers coming into the United States. We have a risk-based system. We go ahead and screen 100% of all the manifest information for every cargo container coming into the United States, and based on information and intelligence and a risk-based algorithm set, we screen them for risk at our National Targeting Center here in the D.C. area and make a determination of those that particularly score for risk, and that's how we focus our resources and our technology.
If a container like we're looking at right now comes from an Arab country, an Islamic country, is it more likely to be checked?
Well, again, it would be on the totality of the risk factors. We would take a look at all the parties involved with that transaction, not just solely the country of origin or the port of final departure.
Let me ask you, Admiral, about the possibility that military equipment, dangerous equipment could come into our country. People could bring in launchers. All kinds of things are possible coming. How do we make sure they don't get in the country?
Again, as Mr. Ahern said, the job of the CBP is to look at the cargo that comes in. The Coast Guard really looks at the port. We're in charge of the port security. We look at the vessels. We inspect the vessels for security, and we also look at the facilities themselves.
Admiral, excuse me, I don't have much time. What happens if you hear that there's a big shipment of U.S. Not material, but heavy military equipment coming in, artillery, armor, that kind of thing? How do you check on that?
Well, we have a layered.
Make sure nobody sabotages.
We have a layered defense, and if we knew if we had a cargo that was a risky cargo, we would try to board that as far offshore as we possibly could. And in a number of cases, we have looked at vessels.
Mr. Ahern, let's get to the question. There's been a lot of argument about what security means. There's security like cops and guys in uniform standing around to make sure nobody comes and sabotages port cargo. But there's also the cargo that comes in these big containers. You know, I read about this guy who went around from New York to Dallas, hiding in one of these containers. He obviously wasn't checked. He may have been caught on arrival, but he had already been able to do. Who checks to see what's in the containers? The U.S. Customs, Coast Guard, or the company that runs the port?
That is a responsibility of the United States Customs and Border Protection.
So the company, in this case, the company Dubai Ports World, which has just taken over this British company, they wouldn't be the ones checking in the containers?
Absolutely not. And
really?
That's one of the distinctions we need to make sure as far as the viewers understand, that the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection has a responsibility for inspecting containers coming in from foreign to make sure that they don't contain any weapon of mass destruction or any contraband of any kind. And I think it's important to know that the ports in the United States are not just the first time we encounter this cargo. We have in 42 ports throughout the world Customs and Border Protection officers there through the Container Security Initiative screening before they get put on the ship.
So it doesn't matter whether an Arab government-owned company buys a British company in a takeover, a hostile takeover. It doesn't matter to our security, you're saying? I'm
saying as far as this transaction that's been in the media in the last few days has not changed the operational protocols or increased the risk in our security of the ports at all.
So you think it's the temperature of the teapot?
Well, I think it hasn't changed any of the security in this country. I think that certainly this government, this administration, this Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security or our agencies would not have endorsed something that would diminish the security of this country.
Do you think this is an ethnic feud where we're just going after Arabs?
Pardon me?
Do you think this is an ethnic feud? We're just going after Arabs?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I think certainly there's just a lot of interesting issues that are being discussed openly in this, and I think, again, the security of the country was not compromised.
Admiral, I know you're a serving officer and you can't really express politics, but are you worried about this or not?
Well, certainly, to follow on to Mr. Ahern, we would inspect the facilities the same regardless of which company owns the facilities, foreign or domestic.
So you trust but verify.
And I would also add the fact that these are facilities that P&O currently owns that will be taken over.
The British company.
For instance, in the Port of New York, there are 182 regulated facilities, and P&O currently runs or operates or owns 2 of those facilities.
That's all.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it has been overblown. Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Thomas Gilmore and Jason Ahern. Thank you, sir.